Globally, the youth bulge presents significant of unemployment, social instability, radicalization, among others. Africa, with a youthful population of over 400 million individuals aged between 15 and 35 years, has the largest demographic of its kind globally. And of course, this presents both a challenge and an opportunity for most African states. And a good example is Kenya, which from the 2019 census has a rapidly growing young population with slightly over 70% being under 35 years of age. This young population could be a curse or a blessing. The recent Gen Z-led protests initially centered around the 2024 finance bill and later morphing into other areas of political accountability underscores the growing demand for policies that address economic pressures and governance issues affecting this younger generation. This is what informed Mashariki Research and Policy Center to commission a study early in June to gather insights on how to harness this demographic dividend in Kenya. Our researchers, Dr. Mwangi, the head of research department, and Dr. Kirui, our associate fellow, have made great recommendations for the Kenyan policymakers that are quite apt, actor-specific, and even singling out target points of action. And I'm sure more practical interventions will come out of our deliberations today. Lastly, I wish to once again thank all of you for joining us today. We value your time and we do not take it for granted. We actually view this as an opportunity for intergenerational dialogue to provide solutions to a problem of our time. We have therefore brought together young readers like Ms. Chere Omulako Omlando to give their perspectives on makers like Ambassador Salah Ahmad from the African Union Governance Architecture Secretariat. We also have seasoned academics like practitioners like Emi Auma from the INDO world. And we also have a head of a think tank, Professor Peter Kagwanja of African Policy Institute. Other discussants include Inspector General retired Boynet, our Deputy National Security Advisor, Dr. Gikonyo, a law expert and lecturer at the University of Nairobi, and Mr. Abdi Sadiq, a youth empowerment expert from the UNDP. With this array of experts, I am sure together we can engage in fruitful deliberations and identify additional practical policy solutions to harness the potentials of our youthful population for economic development in Kenya and beyond. Once again, I want to thank you for honoring our invitation, and please join me in welcoming our moderator, Dr. Willie Zokumu, to continue with the program. Daktari, take the floor.
Thank you so much, Brigadier Kabage, and thank you to the Mashariki team for the invite and the opportunity to participate in this important forum. A very good morning to all of us, and welcome to this policy discussion today that is hosted by Mashariki Research and Policy Center. The topic of today is expert conversations on youth bulge and demographic dividend, harnessing their economic development potentials in Kenya. We are very, very delighted today to host these distinguished experts from across policy, academia, and senior government officials, as has been mentioned by Brigadier Kabage. And allow me at this point to introduce our presenters and discussants for today. We will have presentations from Dr. John Mwangi, the head of research at Mashariki Policy Research Center, and Dr. Peter Kirui from Mashariki Policy Research Center. Thereafter, we will have discussants who will be led by Professor Peter Kagwanja, the CEO of Africa Policy Institute, Ambassador Salah Hamad from the Africa Union, Ms. Amy Auma from International Alert, Professor Musharia Munene from the Horn of Africa Institute, Ms. Sherry Omulako from Mashiriki Police Research Center, Dr. Constance Gikonyo from the University of Nairobi, Mr. Abdi Dadik from UNDP, and lastly from Mr. Joseph Boynet, the former IG of Kenya and currently Deputy National Security Advisor at the Office of the President. So at this juncture, I would like to welcome Dr. John Mwangi and Dr. Peter Kirui to start us off with the presentation on Youth Bulge Demographic Dividend, harnessing the economic development potentials in Kenya. Welcome, John and Peter Kirui.
And a warm welcome again to all the distinguished participants and discussants joining us on this very important conversation. My name is John Mwangi, and I'll co-present this paper with my colleague, Dr. Peter Kirui, and thereafter we'll get to the discussion part. So just to introduce the paper, this paper is a policy brief. It was commissioned by Mashariki Research and Policy Center in mid-June. And as has been mentioned before, the context that elicited this conversation was the Generation Z protests that began somewhere in middle of June. Initially, we were focused on the finance bill, but they soon morphed into other wider around governance and political accountability. So this paper but also it's an important conversation to have at this point on the continent. Here it's focused on Kenya, but I'll just invite you to that will be useful in our discussions today. The opportunity in Africa that young people, will comprise about 60% of the population, but also importantly, they will make up 40% of the global population. The demographics across the African continent are that we have a very young population, which in demographic studies, we are calling the youth bulge, which is basically the idea that the share of the population that is comprised of children and young adults is growing. And therefore, for policymakers, this is an important conversation. So for scholars who work on the youth bulge, the argument is always that, is the youth bulge a blessing or a curse, or what some other scholars, especially in conflict studies, have tended to call it a demographic tangle, that if you have a growing young population that is not able to to absorb or to be absorbed into the job market or to find ways of earning an income, that can become a challenge. And there have been hypotheses arguing that it can be a time bomb in terms of elevating the risks of civil conflicts and political instability generally. But what we are holding in the conversation today is to argue that there is economic growth potential if this demographic there are proper investments to do that. So when we began with this paper, we looked at a couple of documents that have informed the conversation at the Kenyan level. We began with the Kenya Sessional paper number 10 on African socialism and its application to planning in Kenya. This was one of the early, economic development plans in Kenya, produced in 1965. At the time, Kenya's was going, it was at the early stages of Kenya's independence, and the policymakers at the time were concerned with how to expand educational training and apprenticeship programs, and projecting even up to the year 2000 that how then does the country project or envision and plan for a population that was expected to grow rapidly by the year 2000. So it made very specific recommendations around how to spur economic growth. At the time, the conversation was focused on the potential of the agriculture and the concern a bit about sound. Just pause for a minute.
John, we can hear you.
All right, I'll keep going. So I'm just making a conversation that how we began with this paper, we looked at that document, and then of course we went ahead to look at the sessional paper that built on to the 1965 paper, which is the 1986 Economic Management for Economic Growth, which again called for rapid expansion of growing the economy and so on. And then in the NAC administration, there was the formulation of the Vision 2030. So that's the context in which we sent our conversation. But also in 2016, the African Union developed the African Union roadmap on harnessing the demographic dividend for youth, and which made 4 pathways which are relevant in our conversation today. It talked about how the African Union, and of course through cascading that to the African Union member states, how countries needed to address questions of employment and entrepreneurship, education and skills development, health and well-being, rights, governance, and employment. And this was the need really to expand and to harness this opportunity. Now, coming back to the Kenyan context, youth unemployment has remained a challenge, again, as the population is expanding. And so again, following the African Union roadmap, the Kenyan government also developed the roadmap, 2020 to 2030 demographic dividend roadmap that also started up today, speaking to how to expand the opportunities in education, opportunities in skills development, opportunities in empowerment, and opportunities in health and so on. And the purpose of that is to ensure that this population is able to, to harness, to have these opportunities and that as well. Now, how then are we approaching this paper? And I'll be finishing shortly just to allow the other presenter to basically go through the recommendations. In our policy brief, we argue that yes, we make the case that we need to expand educational opportunities, we need to expand skills development, we need to expand health and other factors that will make the economy to grow and develop. But we are cognizant that across the continent and across the the world, that we are in a sense of economic recession as well. So as we engage in these conversations, we are also context specific, that we are only coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and after that, the economy, the economic growth has not been moving rapidly as expected. But at the same time, because we want to harness this demographic dividend, how then we invest in this in the youth, so that then they become an opportunity and not a cost. With those background remarks, I'd now like to invite Dr. Peter Kirui to conclude with some highlights from our brief and also make some recommendations and then open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. John Mwangi. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, as rightly said by the presenter who was gone before me, I'm Dr. Peter Kirui, an associate fellow at Mashariki and also lecturer at University of Eldoret. Just to go directly to what, to build a little bit of what John has already mentioned. Indeed, in our paper, we looked at several interventions that have already been proposed in other jurisdictions. If you look at the African Union document, for example, that first talked about the demographic dividend and how that can be harnessed, which later on became domesticated in Kenya. Generally speaking, they focus on education and training, employment opportunities and entrepreneurship, involving the youth in governance and generally healthcare. Now, for our brief, we did look at the three of them. First of all is looking at employment. Now, about 1 million youth or thereabout join the labor market every year. Now, the labor market is not able to absorb these particular youths. And as a result, we have a lot of youths who are actually unemployed, yet they are educated. Part of the reason which has already been alluded in terms of the Gen Z protest, for example, it was actually driven by young people who are well educated, but most of them unemployed. And there are many factors that has led us to this point. As already mentioned, there are several things. Generally, the economy is not doing well. We are just out of COVID. For the case of Kenya, we are just from an election period. And all these have some sort of nexus in terms of creating a robust business environment that can actually enable the creation of job opportunities and so on and so forth. Now, generally speaking, there are several factors or interventions by the government. Part of them was the digital Ajira plan, for example, where the government was trying to harness the digital platforms and create jobs beyond the physical jobs that we know. Yes, that program to some extent has worked, but again, it has not been able to maybe get many of the youths actually to be engaged. Now, in terms of business environment, when we look at the survey tool that we gave out, it is very clear that the business environment is a bit harsh for many entrepreneurial youths. The process of maybe business registration is still riddled with red tape and several other factors, which generally then make the business environment not very, very, very friendly for many, especially the youth. And as a result, we have these youths now having, they do not have the leg room, therefore, to actually create job opportunities. Of course, the government has intervened in terms of that, partly looking at, for example, the internship program in the public service, in the teacher service, and so on. But again, as rightly put, with about 1 million getting into the job market, KIPRA puts it at around 500,000 to 800,000. But generally speaking, in and about 1 million, then we are not able to actually have all of them. Now, in terms of skills and development, before I go to the recommendations, there have been talks about, and studies also show that we have a little bit of a mismatch between the skills that are acquired in the training institutions and what is actually required in the job market. Of course, this is something that can be canvassed further. But apart from that, we actually acknowledge that it's not just about the skills. It's also about the environment. It's about economics. It's about the politics. It's about the governance. So it's a combination of several factors that are going to create this kind of environment where we seem to have poor linkage between training institutions and actually the the work market. Of course, this has been addressed partly through the internship program, where they are expected to get on-the-job training to try and transition these young graduates into the job market. On the third issue that we also looked at is on the rights and governance. The youths who, according to our constitution, fall between the ages of, say, 18 and 35. In other jurisdictions, it is maybe 15 to 35. Generally, they are marginalized. Some people have called them the marginalized majority, calling them the marginalized majority in the sense that they are somehow disadvantaged. They have the numbers, yes, but in terms of job opportunities and several other opportunities that should be coming their way because of their numbers, they are actually marginalized in that process. Of course, in the African Union level, there are a number of instruments which have tried to engage the youth more. We have the African Youth Charter, and several other policy and legal documents which have tried to bring in the youth into the governance table, because part of the things that we need to do is that the youths themselves are supposed to be the drivers of this particular process. In actually our tool, what came out, for example, is although the government was very keen to try and create opportunities for jobs, the youths, when you ask them, actually, they seem to complain more about the environment. In other words, they're kind of saying, we want to be empowered to do things ourselves. So it's not just about the government providing it, but they also talk about the environment, which is going to be enabling enough for them to actually participate, not just in the governance processes, but ensure that they push through policy documents that are going to be friendly to the youth and that they are going to enhance opportunities. Quickly, in a minute or so, to the recommendations so that we can have time. We had a number of recommendations, but because of time, I'm not going to go specific. We actually had ministry-specific recommendations in terms of what should the Ministry of Education do, for example, what should the Ministry, the Treasury do, and so on. But I'm going to briefly mention three that I think came out strongly. One is about, in regard to addressing entrepreneurship and employment opportunities, the issue of taxation and generally regulation, business environment came in very, very strongly. In part of our recommendations, for example, about taxes, we have argued that it is important to ensure that the finance bill does not deviate very much from the normal tax regime. That will give the government an opportunity to just improve on what is existing. And it is also going to create a good business and an environment, predictability in terms of businesses, so that they're able to plan ahead, maybe for 5 years, for 10 years, knowing that the taxation regime is this way or that way. That is one. In terms of harnessing the training opportunities, there are several recommendations we have made there. And apart from the job opportunities that are targeted at, say, working abroad, for example, to just top up on the business environment that is a bit weak on our part, we have argued that there are also other low-hanging fruits. For example, if it's about education, apart from just seeking the job opportunities, the government can also negotiate, especially through the Ministry of Education, for example. They can negotiate with other countries, say in the West, for example, about say exempting Kenyans, for example, from the English language, training courses, where they're supposed to pay a lot of money first to sit for the English language. Yet there are some countries, for example, say Nigeria and others, for instance, who have negotiated with this government so that they are exempted from the English language. There are several other recommendations that we have made. Among other recommendations is the scaling of entrepreneurship and skills development training for young people to better prepare them for the world of entrepreneurship. This is already happening, of course, through the Ajira digital program. But again, the level in which it is still happening is still low, and there is need to actually even publicize that program more so that we can have more youths being aware of the opportunities that are waiting for them outside there. I hope to engage more on other recommendations as we engage further. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. John Mwangi and Dr. Peter Kirui, for a very engaging discussion on on the paper that you've done on Youth Bulge in Kenya. We really appreciate you sticking to the time. At this juncture, I would like to invite the discussants, but before then, I just want to emphasize that this is a policy forum, and we want the comments and discussions to be geared towards the policy debate that Mashiriki Policy Research Center has put before us for today, and not on any other diversions. So at this point, I would like to invite Professor Peter Kagwanja, the CEO of Africa Policy Institute, to give his remarks based on this presentation. Professor Kagwanja, you have 10 minutes. Do we have Professor Kagwanja with us?
He's not with us. You can go to the next.
Okay, at this juncture, then we invite Ambassador Salah Ahmed, the head of AGA APSA Secretariat at the Africa Union. Welcome, Ambassador Salah.
Thank you very much indeed for having me this morning. And to be honest with you, I was quite worried that I would be speaking after our professor. But I think God worked a miracle to allow me to speak before our distinguished professor. So at least I will not be I will not be squeezed into the corner, because speaking after a professor is not an easy business. But let me begin by thanking Mashariki Research and Policy Center for inviting the AGA APSA Secretariat. I have known our dear brother and friend, Brigadier retired Dr. Robert Kabaki for a while. In fact, I have seen how interested he is in peace building, in peacemaking, mediation, building communities and societies after conflicts. But also, as he was very successful in his military career, he has been also very keen on supporting the African Union programs in terms of youth engagement and women empowerment. So when I received the invitation with his signature, I didn't really think twice to accept this wonderful invitation and to be part of this fascinating conversation that is taking place today on harnessing youth economic development potentials in Kenya. I believe I also have 10 minutes, so I will be very brief in my contribution. And my contribution will be geared on raising some challenges first, but then making some recommendations in support of the study that was presented. But before I proceed, I really hope that we have enough youth with us this morning around the table. I know our Brigadier General is a youth at heart, just like myself, but I really wonder how many youth we have around the table this morning. I'm asking this question because after my experience with the African Union, I came to realize that in many cases, we tend to develop policies and programs for youth in their absence, without their presence around the table. So the youth participation in the development of policies in Africa is quite weak, I would say. In Nigeria, they have they say that don't shave a man in his absence. Don't shave a man hair in his absence. So I think in many cases we keep shaving the hair of the youth in their absence in Africa, and this is really an issue that needs to be addressed. Our two doctors, the researchers, mentioned that the African Union have developed a number of policies, a number of instruments. They mentioned the African Youth Charter, which is currently ratified by 41 member states out of 55 member states. To be very honest with you, I personally, as an African youth at heart, I believe that it is quite disappointing that we still don't have universal ratification for this very important treaty. Because I really don't see any reason why member states are not ratifying this treaty. The treaty speaks about the majority of the African population, because as we all know, out of the 1.2 or 0.4 billion citizens of Africa, close to 65, if not 75%, are below the age of 35. So at the majority, I think a charter like this should really be, should have been received and welcomed by member states and ratified fully, but not just ratified, but also ratified and implemented. So the implementation of the African Youth Charter is quite, I would say, minimal, simply because also there is no mechanisms in place to evaluate the implementation of the Youth Charter currently. And this is another issue that was discussed during the recent summit in Accra, the media coordination meeting, where there is now a process in place to develop a mechanism that will receive reporting on the African Youth Charter on a regular basis. We have also the African Youth Engagement Strategy, known as YES, and the African Women Empowerment Strategy, known as WES. These strategies have been also developed almost 10 years ago, adopted by the policy organs of the African Union. And the main purpose of these two strategies is to involve our African youth in the governance affairs at the national level, to make sure that they are part of the executive, they are part of the parliaments and legislative bodies, and they are part of other bodies or other systems that are available at the national level. To what extent that the African Union member states have ratified, not ratified because there's no ratification here, but I would say to some extent, the implementation of these two strategies have been in place. We all know the what is known as Agenda 2063, the blueprint for building the Africa we want and the Africa we deserve. And there's of course a big section in each and every action plan of the implementation of Agenda 2063 that concerning the African youth. But to what extent the African youth are aware of this instrument? To what extent the African youth are participating in the implementation of the action plan, the 10 years action plan. Now we are in the second 10 years action plan. To what extent the African youth are involved in it? We had the experience of the African Youth Decade Plan of Action, 2009-2018. After the examination of these very important processes, we came to realize that so many African youth, they have set their mind, in fact, into having a better future elsewhere in Africa. So while they are still within the education system, the plan is not really about building a life in Africa, but the plan is always about trying to explore better future elsewhere. And the reason is because our African youth, and let's be honest, they have lost hope in our governance systems at the national level. They don't see improvement. They see excuses all the time. And I think that is why it is very important for us to agree today that there is really need for engaging youth further in addressing the challenges that have been identified by this research. I want to quickly, since I don't have much time, to speak about three things. Number one, the education system in Africa. This year, as we all know, has been declared as the year of education in Africa. And the reason is our heads of state and government came to realize the fact that the systems that we currently have in place, they are either inherited from the colonial power or they don't really match the needs of our African societies and African communities. We are now in August, and I really wonder what has been done by our African member states to examine the current educational systems that we have in place. I think the research to some extent touched on the fact that, our educational systems are not really providing what we really need, the skills that we really need. So how can we really address this matter to make sure that our educational systems are producing graduates that could find jobs easily, and if not, they can then be also job creators themselves. The second issue is the support that usually provided by member states to youth to begin their own investment projects. Across the board, not only Kenya, I believe that the interest rates are not friendly enough for youth to begin businesses in Africa. Also, the process of having a guarantor, the process of having something to support your business initiative. And that is why we see more youth flourishing elsewhere outside of Africa, because of the support they receive from the societies and the communities where they reside. Some African youth, they have great ideas, but they cannot get the financial support they need locally here. And once they go through the struggle of crossing the Mediterranean and the Sahara and they reach Europe or America, they are able to get the support they need, and then their ideas become a reality. So how can we have economic programs that are tailored to support African youth? The third issue, and this will be my last point, is the issue of the mindset once again. Our African youth, unfortunately, because of the huge media campaign from other stakeholders, in many cases, they don't see Africa with the true eye of an African person. For them, Africa is a poor place. Africa is a dark continent, and they don't really try to be guided by some of the instruments that are calling for them to move freely in Africa to establish a new life. We know the Continental Free Trade Agreement. We have now the new African free movement of persons and the free movement of persons and starting a new life. So many protocols out there, but the African youth are not aware of them. So the question is, how can we really contribute? How can we really raise awareness about all of these instruments that we currently have? So our African youth will explore options here internally within the continent before they drown in the Mediterranean or die in the desert trying to cross to elsewhere. Last but not least, I think the issue of the mindset, as I mentioned, is quite important, and we need to really address it, simply because our African youth, within the current challenges that they are facing, probably they have lost hope in the future. And I think through this generational exchange and intergenerational dialogue, we can try to really speak to our youth and at least replant hope within them that tomorrow will be better and Africa will be a better place for all of us to live. Africa is our home. Africa is our future. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Salah Ahmed, and for a very illuminating discussion on your take on the youth in Africa. For me, the most important thing, among others that you mentioned, is that to what extent are Africa Youth part of the Africa Youth policy processes? I think this is part of the reason why we are here, and we are glad to receive this kind of a contribution. So our next speaker is Ms. Amy Auma, Country Director, Kenya and Horn of Africa at the International Alert. Welcome, Ms. Auma. You have 10 minutes. Amy?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. As you've heard, or rather, good morning, everybody. As you've heard, my name is Amy Auma Odero. I lead the International Alert's work in Kenya and the Horn of Africa. International Alert is an international peace-building organization headquartered in the UK. So allow me to just, for context, say this briefly, that our work focuses on solving the root causes of conflict with people from across divides, starting from the grassroots to the policy level. Our work purpose is to contribute to peace, inspire, inform, support, and enhance the efforts of others to do so. So I'm really glad to be speaking on this really important discussion this morning. I read the policy brief, I will say, with a lot of interest. And because of the peace building and governance background of my organization, also with that lens, the peace building and conflict sensitivity lens. And so you will notice that my reflections on the paper and generally on this subject will draw from this peace building lens and this peace building orientation, and largely also our work on peace economies at International Alert. So again, I'm going to look at the three pillars and draw in, these experiences and reflections. And for context, again, allow me to say that peace economies are processes and initiatives that not only generate economic growth, but also contribute to social stability and peace. In many contexts, and from our experience, this includes the informal economies. And I would like to say that the informal economies are often overlooked, but are incredibly significant, particularly in Kenya and the Global South, where a huge number of young people are engaged in sectors that generate their day-to-day livelihoods from the informal sector. In terms of then the three policy areas that we have discussed, and starting from the question of the youth bulge and what it means, as a peace building and governance practitioner, I want to say that yes, it is true from my experience that the youth bulge represents a tremendous opportunity, a demographic dividend, as already alluded to in the paper. But it's also true that without the right opportunities and supports, this large youthful population could become a vehicle for instability, potentially exacerbating existing conflicts or creating new ones, and unfortunately then reversing gains that have been made around the economy. If you think about the opportunities that exist around employment and entrepreneurship and the discussions that I have seen in the paper, one of the first things that I would like to, I think, emphasize and draw attention to everyone that I think is really critical for policymakers especially, is the need to harness the potential of the informal economies for stability and economic growth. And why do I say this? For those of us who work with young people, or as Ambassador Salah has said, who are youthful at heart, you'll agree with me that the informal economy is not just a safety net. It is a vibrant space where youth can thrive, innovate, and contribute to broader societal stability and growth. But this is if this is properly supported, resulting in the quality of employment that young people desire, and I think all of us. The other thing that I find very critical, that again, for emphasis from the paper, is that the paper confirms that young people do recognize the regulatory role of the government. And the question of the environment, conducive environment, becomes really key. And I do recognize that Kenya is one country where the informal sector, for instance, is a significant space where young people have found economic opportunities. I emphasize informal sector because, and I think I've noticed somebody, even in the comments, talking about, are there jobs to be given or jobs to be created? And so this is, for me, a significant area of emphasis. And Kenya is one of the countries where this sector is a significant space. And young people have found economic opportunities in this. Supporting and formalizing this sector, linking to the fact that young people say they do recognize the regulatory role of the government, is critical. And this can be a vehicle for enabling peace economies, basically providing young people with quality and dignified livelihood sources and reducing their vulnerability to conflict and radicalization. A key consideration, however, and something that is important to note for practitioners as well as policymakers, is that ensuring it is important that the support around this particular sector and the formalization processes should be done in ways that are not seen to be disruptive of the essential flexibility and accessibility which exists within the sector, and which has, for the most part, made the sector really important for young people. The other key issue within the employment and entrepreneurship for me is the need to integrate peace economies in the broader youth development frameworks. Economic inclusion of youth is a vehicle for preventing conflicts, in my view, and for the most part can be really critical in preventing feelings of exclusion and marginalization. Targeted policies are thus needed to ensure young people consider economic opportunities are accessible. Economic planning and policies need to ensure that economic activities contribute to peace building. This includes creating accessible spaces for addressing youth grievances, including those around structural inequalities and past issues from the past that impact the current. And this would be through effective governance and economic reforms, as well as supporting mitigation of potential triggers of unrest. The other area that I thought I wanted to really emphasize, again, from the lens of where we work as a civil society organization, is within the education and skills development, it is really important that the role of mentorship for young people and for their empowerment is considered critically. Mentorship presents a crucial bridge between agility and wisdom. So the youth are agile, wisdom exists, and I think that's the essence for this intergenerational conversation. So mentorship plays a vital role in inspiring young people to take initiative and contribute to economic growth and stability. So opportunities need to be provided that support mentorship, provide guidance, provide peer leadership, skills and confidence development, so as to foster a generation of empowered and young people that can take initiative and lead economic growth. The other factor is the need to inspire youth agency and peer-to-peer empowerment. Think about youth or young people as multipliers within peace economies. And I believe immense opportunity lies in leveraging the youth as catalyst of change and leveraging that population as catalyst for change. I think experience has shown that young people who are empowered and engaged can serve as catalyst for peace and development, spreading positive change and fostering environments conducive to economic stability. So it is really critical that processes that inspire young people are led by themselves, and thus the need for youth agency in shaping their futures for them to become leaders in driving economic growth and development. This also includes opportunities for peer empowerment. So initiatives can be more effective if we engage the mobilizing power that exists within the young people. And I want to believe that we have seen from the demonstrations recently the power of self-mobilization and education by young people themselves. So skills development and tech is also critical in expanding youth horizons. And this includes thinking about the impact of digital media in amplifying voices and youth abilities. Again, here I want to emphasize the fact that there is need to support processes that allows young people to think global, act locally, at the same time learn locally from what they do and influence globally. The other area under the rights and governance and empowerment, critical areas for emphasis for me is the need to harness this harnessing this demographic dividend will require us recognizing the role of governance in elevating youth voices. So governance reforms are needed that elevate youth voices, that take advantage of the positive voice that can create change. The recent wave of demonstrations included really significant analysis and depth of thought, and this can be leveraged as part of policy integration, and in a way then recognize and support institutionalization of the role of young people in shaping Kenya's future. Towards the end, I want to also emphasize that we have also witnessed firsthand the evolution of young people from being seen as mere noise to becoming significant and respected voices. So basically no longer in the peripheries, but being as central in what change needs to happen to ensure growth and to realize the kind of development that is desirable. So policy making that creates a sense of ownership and responsibility among young people is critical. It is important to leverage youth networks and build platforms for youth development. The current generation, and I think it's been alluded to already, are creators, constantly seeking opportunities to innovate. So a key finding of the paper is that young people require a conducive environment. I've said that again. And so recognizing this requires that platforms are in place where youth voices can be heard positively, and that governance structures and civil society facilitates this transition, providing young people with the tools and spaces needed for them to collaborate, share ideas, and lead initiatives that drive social and economic change, while also supporting and leveraging networks to enhance the stability for investment to thrive. I think finally, I just want to say that a critical consideration from a broad-based place is the need to integrate conflict sensitivity and context sensitivity in planning processes, and to consider the need for reversing inequalities that exist. So I think I will stop there, and happy to again engage as part of the panel discussions, but I want to thank you very much for listening and to encourage policymakers, stakeholders, and youth themselves to continue building on progress made, ensure that the youth remain central to Kenya's peace and economic development strategies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much for bringing the civil society voice into this discussion. And you've mentioned youth agency, which is sometimes overlooked, and it's important that we have this discussion and the role of youth and what they can do for themselves as creators, as people who have gone to school, and how they can then impact all these planning processes. So thank you so much. So our next speaker is Professor Macharia Munene. Professor Macharia Munene is a professor of history and international relations at the United States International University, Africa, USIU. So we welcome Professor Macharia Munene, and Prof, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm listening to the presenters and the discussions that have come before me. It is clear that we do have a challenge in front of us with regard to what the youth in Africa are up to, or should be up to, meaning what is Africa up to, or where should it be going? I think there are about 4 or so things I would like to touch base on. One is the attitude of the various policy makers in different countries. They appear to lack capacity to develop grand strategies as to what they are up to or should be up to. There is a tendency in many of our countries to outsource thinking, and instead of relying on their own people, they prefer getting advice from some Mzungu in Europe or North America. Those people who are called experts, they are very good, the Africanists, on what's wrong with us and how to fix us. And then they tell us how we should get out of the mess they put us in. And since our leaders do not trust their own people, no wonder they never get things right. They have a problem. So with that, I think it's one of those leaders, Afwaki of Eritrea, who's been trying to talk about African leaders having to rely on African thinkers. And you actually don't have enough think tanks in Africa, and Mashariki is trying to be a good one in that regard. So you commend it for that. But there is a very serious problem, overall problem, policy-making problem, to the extent that our government, their key advisors are not African. And therefore the policies they recommend are counterproductive to African interests. And that explains why we continue having external control. Then neo-colonial, postmodern colonial entanglements and control of our resources, and the ongoing exploitation and regrabbing of African wealth, which is very openly going on, and with the consent of the policymakers. So there is something wrong with the policymaking at the top. That being the case, second, the youth are disillusioned, totally disillusioned. And the uprisings we've seen are as a result of disillusionment with the social political environment in which they are supposed to grow up, and they look up to the leaders, our elders. And what do they see there? Not encouragement. They see glorification of incompetence and ignorance. And if that's what they see, why should they work hard? Huh? Why? So they're asking those questions. Instead of rewarding competence and knowledge, proper knowledge, not Juakali knowledge, which is manufactured through what appear to be the routine nowadays, where universities have become factories for giving papers called degrees, instead of proper education. So if that's what they see, they become very disillusioned with the socio-economic, political environment that they find themselves in. Because the policies at the top are wrong. And people who are in charge don't know what they are doing, but they are there. So the disillusionment of the youth, because our policymakers, despite all the flowery language and good documents, in fact, Kenya has been accused of being very good at producing nice reading documents, which go nowhere. And see, John was mentioning about policy paper, sessional paper, is it, of 1986, number 1, which was supposed to be a follow-up to sessional paper number 10 of 1965. And what was it? It was very good document, which was shelved. And to some extent, it was responsible for what came to be called conditionalities as a way of dealing with the master states. You go begging, then they say, you are good at producing documents, but you are not good at doing anything. So here are conditions for you to follow. So I'm saying that the youth are disillusioned because as a matter of general attitude and behavior, we have glorified incompetence and ignorance while being overly dependent on extracontinental forces as our sources of thinking and policy. In fact, most of the policies, you ask, where did that come from? The IMF, the World Bank told us. Doesn't make any sense. And so when people are told that, they say, what's going on? When did the country surrender its sovereignty to entities called IMF and World Bank and whatever else that decide what's to be done, instead of the citizens deciding themselves? So the disillusionment leads to demotivating. The youth appear not to be interested in hard work because of what they see. Not encouragement, but actual distraction. 3, we have an ongoing revolution of attitude It's not necessarily violent, although there may be some nefarious people who would want to see a little violence. But it is an attitude thing. And the youth are questioning the premise on which a lot of things have been done and are being done. In fact, they are saying, go back to the essence, the basics, the use of common sense, because many of us have lost the use of common sense. Instead, we are relying on somebody else to do what is very normal or should be expected of normal people. So the youth are challenging the external control, the external thinking. And what does this external thinking and external control do? What do? They perpetuate poverty creation. So many of our countries have been becoming poorer. They're not developing. In fact, they are underdeveloping because they are becoming poorer. Instead of producing wealth, they are producing poverty. And in an environment where poverty is being produced instead of wealth being created, of course, there'll be a dissonance. There'll be no jobs of any kind. And that reality is dawning in people. Sometimes we have been told, time immemorial. In fact, from our readings, from the time we started being told before you were born, that the problem with the Africans is that they are getting the wrong education. And therefore, what is supposed to be the right education? So you have no business thinking because that's not your business. Thinking is for the white man. So have something called technical education. And if you check properly, every commission reviewing education comes up with the same argument from the 1920s. So if the technical education is the answer, how come we have so many doctors, engineers, thousands of them, jobless? It's not because they studied those challenging areas like history and philosophy and things like that. It's because there's a problem at the top, at the thinking level. As a result, the failure to create wealth and instead perpetuate poverty creation, there can be no jobs, no matter what you do. Subsequently, again relying on advice and dictate from the master states, the states, the African states, have failed and fail repeatedly to provide the essence of why they are there. Services to their people. They provide no health. They provide no education. So somewhere comes, in the 80s, they started doing calling something they were calling cost sharing.
Excuse me, Prof, you just have about 1 minute to conclude.
Yeah, I'm about to get to the last part. But this animal cost sharing meant that people cannot go to school. Right now, universities, people, thousands of them cannot go because they are being told to pay money they are not supposed to pay. And those people who got free education are the ones now doing that. Something is wrong. So, and that's a way of poverty creation and increasing. Now, as I wind up, because the moderator has advised me properly to wind up, we do need to rethink education. and actually to provide it as a public good to all. And most important, to stress critical thinking. And why does a society provide education for its youth? It's so that they can be able to look after themselves, not to be dependent on somebody else. And that requires critical thinking, good heads on the shoulders, no common sense, which seems to be absent in many places. So addressing the youth, the Kenyan youth and the others, the youth bulge, would require recasting almost everything, particularly policy making. And then you can talk about that things later. So thank you very much. Sorry for taking a little longer.
Thank you so much, Professor Macharia Munene. Thank you for highlighting the fact that sometimes our policy making is outsourced. And that probably could be the problem with addressing the emerging issues with youth in Africa. So our next speaker is Sherry Mulako. Sherry Mulako is a youth representative governance at Mashariki Research and Policy Center. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okumu, and good morning, everybody. And I also want to thank the Brigadier Retired Dr. Kabaga and the MRPC team for this opportunity. As mentioned, I'm Sherry Mulako, policy analyst and researcher with interest in governance, ethics, youth and gender inclusion. And I would also want to highlight that I have some technical issues. That's why my video is not working. Yes. And since I have just 10 minutes, I'll go straight to the point. My contribution will be on internships and on-the-job training within the employment and entrepreneurship key issue. I will discuss a few gaps on this and also some recommendations on the same. While reading the policy paper, I noticed that the policy recommendations, while they are valuable and focus on enhancing entrepreneurship and skills development, there appears to be, there is an element that appears to be overlooked despite this being mentioned briefly on the paper. And the element is on internship opportunities and on the job training. For the internship and on the job trainings, we know how vital they are in bridging the gap between academic education and practical work experience, since they provide young people with the hands-on skills that employers highly value. However, there seems to be a significant catch-22 here, where employers typically seek candidates with experience, yet fresh graduates need experience to get their first job. And so this ends up creating a challenging situation where graduates are caught in a cycle of needing experience in order to gain more experience. I'm going to examine the current recommendations that fall short on this. The first one is on the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Creative Economy, and Sports. There is a focus on scaling youth development, but there's no mention of integrating the internship programs. This omission misses critical opportunities that can offer young people practical work experience. Similarly, the recommendations for the Ministry of Education suggest aligning curricula with market needs, but fail to include internships as a key component. And further, the last recommendation on Ministry of Labor, there's an issue where there's need for structured internship programs that could bridge the gap between education and employment. The absence of a strong emphasis on internships and on the job training intensifies the catch-22 problem that I've spoken of earlier, where the graduates are unable to find jobs due to a lack of experience, while employers are reluctant to hire individuals without the practical skills. This contributes to a higher youth unemployment rate and a disconnect between educational outcomes and job demands. To address this issue, there's need for policy recommendations that include mandatory internships and robust on-the-job training for minimum of about 6 months for fresh graduates, in addition to the 3-month internship programs currently available in institutions. For this, I think the government incentives can come in handy, and sorry, for this, government incentives could be introduced to encourage like private sector partnerships in providing these opportunities in order to curb like bureaucracy issues. The first one, this can be done through tax incentives. The government could offer tax deductions or credits to companies that invest in internships and on-the-job training programs, so that they can help in reducing the financial burden on businesses and companies, hence making this more attractive for them to allocate resources towards this initiative. Another thing, the government can provide direct financial support in the form of grants or subsidies that could help offset the costs associated with setting up and maintaining internship programs, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, since that's where we seem to have the highest gap. And further to effectively addressing the internship and on-the-job training gap, a strong governance framework is essential. For instance, policy implementation and oversight in terms of having robust governance structures to manage and evaluate internship programs, ensuring resources are effectively and accountability are used effectively, and accountability is also maintained, because that's something that even the recent protests were talking about, because there is a lack of accountability in terms of resources in the country. Another thing is coordination among ministries. Like if we have effective collaboration between the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Education and Labor, it will be crucial to creating integrated policies that address the employment gap and align with the market needs. And for my last point, we also need a long-term strategic plan where governance should be able to support long-term strategic planning to adapt policies to economic changes and labor market conditions, ensuring ongoing relevance and impact in terms of the internship jobs created. In conclusion, addressing the internship and on-the-job training gap is essential for resolving the experience paradox faced by both graduates and employers. So by integrating these elements into youth development strategies, we can better prepare young people for the workforce and align educational outcomes with the job markets. I know I've been so fast. It's because of the 10 minutes thing. So thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to your thoughts and questions, and we can engage further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and thank you for keeping the time. You've saved us a few minutes, but we have understood all that you've mentioned. I think you've highlighted the challenges of Kenyan youth in the job market, and those are the realities of our young people that are getting out of colleges every other time. So that's a good representation of the current youth situation. So our next speaker is Dr. Constance Gikonyo. Dr. Gikonyo is a law expert from the University of Nairobi. Welcome, Dr. Gikonyo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okumu, and thank you very much to the organizers, and I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. Now, as has been said, I wear two hats as somebody in the legal profession as well as an academician. So when preparing for this discussion, I opted to focus on the academic side of things, because I asked myself, what role as academics do we have to play in this discussion? And there are a few pointers that I identified in terms of actualizing what has been brought out in the policy brief. And one of the greatest challenges we face in our country, and I believe also in Africa, is we do not believe in data-led decisions. We don't focus on those. And by focusing on data-led decisions, it means we need to engage in research so that we come up with solutions that we have data to support and say, look, this is indeed a problem. Research has shown that this is probably the best way to try and address this problem. But we primarily do not do that. Our own research institutions, most of them, we have very many universities in Kenya. But the truth of the matter is, how many of them are actually engaging in research? How many are training their staff on research matters? Because these people, once trained, will be able to engage in research that will look into these issues we're talking about pertaining to the youth. So that when we are making decisions or trying to implement programs relevant to the youth, they are based on data from research. In addition to that, comes in the aspect of monitoring and evaluation. That once research has been conducted and we have solutions and we implement these solutions, do we engage in monitoring and evaluations? Do we put in place feedback mechanisms that tell us or where we can get feedback from the relevant stakeholders so that we know, is this working? Or if it is not working, why is it not working? How can we improve? And as most of the speakers have said before, engage the relevant stakeholders in this research. And in this case, means engage the youth themselves. Stop making decisions from them and telling them you must do this, yet you're not engaging them, so that they give you the feedback. We are not doing that. Look, for example, at how poorly our NRF, National Research Foundation, is funded. Its funding is continuously being reduced. So where do we get money to undertake the relevant research? In other jurisdictions, you hear of even government going to institutions of higher learning and checking out and seeing research that has been conducted and seeing which are those research that are relevant for the government to bring out the policies that it has. And they tap into this. But do we? We do not. I have even had a situation where a colleague once told me that at a particular institution, they were told they are a teaching institution. How can a university be a teaching institution? Yes, it's a teaching, but at the same time, it is a research institution. And so we need to engage in that. And at the same time, in addition to undertaking research to find solutions and engaging the relevant stakeholders, including the youth, we should focus the research on what is relevant to our needs. Professor Munene has mentioned it. We should not focus on just bringing in experts from the West and taking in what they do. We should be the ones identifying what are our needs. And once we do this research, finding solutions that suit us, find solutions that are relevant to our unique circumstances, not solutions just because they have worked elsewhere, we pick them. We need to identify solutions that are relevant and applicable to our situations. And that's why I'm saying relevant research is important. It has also been said the issue of mismatch between education and the labor markets. And that hence creates all this problem and a mismatch between what our education system is providing. Now, currently, we are implementing a new system called the CBC system. And the question I would like to ask, is the CBC system really working towards resolving this mismatch? Some of when you listen to very many people, there's a hue and cry that it's a good system, but its implementation is not working. And to just give and on a light note, I'm sure many of us have seen the video of the children in the village who are being taught to swim on soil. Really, is swimming a relevant skill to teach a child in the village? Instead of that swimming activity, is there something else that would have been more relevant to that child and to empower that child so that as they become a youth, they are more empowered in terms of utilizing their talent instead of teaching them such an exercise? And this, to me, is also because of our attitude towards curriculum development. Yes, we bring in the educational experts, true, but do we bring in all the relevant stakeholders? So as has been said, these people who are going to be taught through this system, the youth themselves, are they involved? The industry stakeholders, are they involved in this curriculum development? Or we just put educational experts somewhere, they develop this curriculum, and we start implementing it without having input. Then once we implement these curriculums, are we doing follow-ups, monitoring and evaluation to see what is happening so that we know what needs to be improved, what is working, what is not? So in addition to this issue of mismatch between education and labor markets, I would love to say we need to leverage on PPPs, public-private partnerships, at all levels, from secondary schools, at the university levels, most importantly. That way we will open up the minds of the youth. And this brings me to another problem that we need to address: social and cultural barriers. And by this, I specifically I'm talking about resistance to change. We need to change our attitude. One, there's a tendency in our country, for one, to believe that particular jobs are better than others. So that if you are not called to the university to do medicine, engineering, law, architecture, that you're somehow lesser of a person, or that you're not bright enough. That is a fallacy, and a fallacy which has been perpetuated at all levels. The parents, the educationists, we ourselves in academia, instead of encouraging thinking so that this youth will be able to think broadly and see what skills have I learned? How can I apply these skills to create employment for myself? So we need to change that attitude, or the idea that formal employment is better than informal employment. No. And this attitude change, how we conduct even our teaching as academics at the university, will contribute towards opening up the minds of the youth so that they can find different ways to fit in. The other aspects I would love to mention, I've talked about inadequate monitoring and evaluation. There's the issue of absence of accountability, as has been mentioned by one of the speakers. We implement programs even for the youth, but what are the accountability mechanisms that are in place? We don't have any, right? So that makes even the youth to be disillusioned, so that even when we come up with solutions that would probably work, they are wondering, well, this will end up like just the other, so why bother, okay? Then there's also the problem of government agencies acting in silos. Each is coming up with similar programs, and each wants to take, should I say, the limelight, that we are the ones who came up with this, instead of working together to try and address these issues. So this operating in silos and trying to outshine each other in terms of implementing the policies or the strategies to address these issues relating to the youth need to be done away with. The use, again, we should encourage the utilization of digital platforms to engage the youth. The youth have clearly taught us in these last couple of months that there are very many digital platforms available. The use of X, for example, I'm sure most people were not aware, but the youth clearly showed that the X is a platform that is accessible to very many youth, even up country, and that is a forum that we can use to engage them. So let's use these forums, these digital platforms, to engage them as relevant stakeholders in the different aspects that we are doing that relate to the youth. So for the example, when we talk about getting feedback on policies that have been implemented, let's stop making it complicated. We can get that feedback through a forum like X, where we bring them on board. Okay? And let's stop making these measures cosmetic, where we just do it to tick a box. Let's actually do it seriously, seeking to get the relevant comments. And I can see my time is up. Just two more points. One, we need to fund the NRF and encourage research at learning institutions. And lastly, embrace technology. For example, in matters to do with accountability, government can implement the use of blockchain technology to monitor funds allocation. All these youth funds that we hear funds were allocated at the Hustler Fund, why can't we monitor properly? Why can't we implement the use of blockchain technology to monitor this? So thank you for the time. These are my few comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gikonyo, for highlighting a lot of issues. One of the ones that I picked is on the lack of feedback mechanisms on some of the policy documents that have been passed through. The question then is public participation as a system? Is it feedback enough to have the law recognizing public participation?
Be audible, please. Be audible, please.
Okay, so what we are saying is that Dr. Gikonyo has highlighted the lack of feedback systems in policy processes. And one of the forums that normally provides this is on public participation on policy processes through Parliament and other forums. And that is probably one of the things that we are questioning in this engagement today. So thank you so much to everybody who has presented and given their comments on the discussion that we have had today. I really appreciate many of you for keeping up with the time. I know in some cases we went overboard by 1 or 2 minutes, but I didn't want to stop anybody because I found it very, very interesting the way people are articulating their points. So we want to open it up now for a plenary discussion, and we want to encourage everybody to raise up their hands through the raise up function on Zoom and bring up all the questions that you have between now and the next 20 minutes so that we can conclude in good time. Professor Zed and Iraqi highlighted some of the challenges that we are having already with youths and jobs. And he asked, why do we assume that there are jobs we are denying the youth? Creating jobs is easy. Create a market for quality goods and services. The market can be local or foreign. Think of Italian shoes, blah, blah, blah. So I want to start with this comment from Professor Iraqi, who is very familiar to us in writing on matters youth and the economy in this country. Why do we assume that there are jobs that we are denying the youth? Is it a policy challenge on the part of policymakers? Or is it an over expectation on the part of the youth that have gone to school and are expecting the country to be able to absorb them in employment? I probably want to start with Dr. John Mwangi and Peter Kirui. Dr. John? Should I repeat the question?
Dr. Willis, could you take that question, please? Yes, yes. Or maybe
Yes.
Professor Iraki can also talk about library. Sorry.
Okay, Professor Iraki, if you're here.
What's the question?
I was just highlighting your comment on why do we assume that there are jobs that we are denying the youth? And the question then is it that the youth themselves are having a lot of expectations when they come from college? Or is it a problem, is it a systemic problem within government institutions that are not probably providing this youth?
I think this is quite an interesting question, because anytime I hear people saying that the youth don't have a job, it seems as if that there are some jobs hidden somewhere for the people who are elderly, for the people who are experienced, and we are denying the youth. But the truth is, if you look at the growth rate of the Kenyan economy, we are not creating enough jobs. So what we need to do is exactly what somebody said a bit earlier. Let the youth create the jobs. And I've always argued that Bill Gates was 19 years when he created Microsoft. Zuckerberg was 23 years when he created Facebook. So it is very important that because most jobs are in the private sector, we make it very easy for the youth to start a job, because there are no jobs in the public sector. Anybody in the public sector here will tell you that we have less than 1 billion jobs in the public sector. So the jobs are in the private sector. So let's make this area as conducive as possible to the youth, so that they start jobs, they expand them, we get our Googles, we get our Toyotas, we get our Facebooks, and there will be enough jobs. And the other argument I was coming up with is, creating a job is very easy. It's a question of somebody buying something, because when you buy something, you create demand. And that's why I'm saying, let's create quality goods and quality services that can be demanded locally, internationally, and jobs will be there. About expectations, to some extent, we have a lot of expectations. For example, it is public, 75% of the students in our universities are in social sciences. But you all know, and I know, that most jobs are not in social sciences. So let's make sure that we balance expectations and reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I see a few hands are going up. So I would want to request that for every question that you ask, you could please identify the person that you'd like to respond to this question. So I'll start with Balozi, please. Go ahead. Ambassador, please. Ambassador, your phone is your computer is muted. Okay, we're not able to get Ambassador to speak. So can we go to LNS Kongani?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the insightful contribution. So mine is more or less a reflection and maybe rhetorical questions. But I see a similar comment regarding technology, and I'll speak from academic perspective. And when we talk about the mismatch of job, we are likely to see a very big gap increasing in that, particularly in the era of AI. So what we should be doing, seeing that a lot of demonizing use of AI in our education system, I think we're really missing the point. What we need to do is it is here to stay. So we really need to embrace it and have a conversation with our youth and how to be safe around it and how to leverage it so that we are able to produce youth who are, or people who can be able to apply their skills accordingly. And then the other question is, in regards to developing policy targeted interventions, why can't we leverage the decentralized systems? Like we have all these policies developed right from the counties, informing up to the national levels. In regards to research, I think we really need to increase to accelerate the transdisciplinary research, perhaps for us to be able to bring together academia and different non-academia actors in research, and especially so having battery locations that encourage transdisciplinary research so that we can be able to develop or work on research that is relevant and that will actually be able to address our local solutions. In the interest of time, maybe I'll add other comments in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kongani, for your insightful comments. I think one of the things that you've highlighted is on the need to accelerate transdisciplinary research. And as a researcher, I can tell you it would be a good thing to do. Normally, the challenge with that is getting funding from across board when you're doing interdisciplinary research. People still tend to stick to their small quarters. I see the hand of the ambassador is still raised. I don't know whether he's there. Ambassador, are you back? Okay, Valtino, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. for that. I agree with Dr. Iraki, but it's important to emphasize that while the youth are expected to be innovative in creating job opportunities for themselves, the government also has a critical role to play. This includes ensuring that young entrepreneurs are supported through structures and protective initiatives like copyrights and other legal safeguards. Thank you.
Thank you, Valtino, for your comments. I would go to Dr. Gikonyo.
Right, thank you. I wish to respond to something that has been said about the transdisciplinary research. Actually, as currently as it is, the NRF, initially, when it began, they were only funding individual research. But now, to get funding from NRF, one, you must be in a cohort. You cannot be just a single researcher, you must be in a cohort. And also they are working towards now ensuring the research is transdisciplinary. Even for other international funders, the push now is for transdisciplinary kind of research when you are responding to a call. So that is definitely something that, you know, is a way forward. And but sadly, when we come to the institutional level, you of higher learning in Kenya have, for example, a properly managed grants system, meaning that when the researchers in those institutions apply for research grants, that they will be able, the institution will be able to
I think Dr. Gikonyo is having a connectivity problem. Dr. Gikonyo?
Watch over these funds in a system that is well documented. Apologies, I think my network is the one that is having a problem. Sorry, so to emphasize that we need also to develop grant maintenance system at university levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gikonyo. And I think earlier you spoke about blockchain technology, and somebody, Brian, is very happy to hear that from you, and she is hoping that you can have organize a policy forum like this one so that can also be a subject of discussion at a later date. So thank you so much. Any other questions, colleagues?
My hand is up.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Daktari. I'm sorry, I don't have internet where I am, so I am using this gadget written iPhone. My name is Dr. Nyangara. Dr. Nyangara teaches at Laikipia University. Dr. Nyangara is the president for UNESCO Kenya and vice president for Africa for UNESCO clubs, centers, and associations. I wanted to really appreciate Dr. Gikonyo on implementation of programs through empirical evidence, which is available. But sadly, this is not done. The reason behind this, I can't understand. I am coming here from having worked in the United Nations and several agencies for almost 42 years now. And I just want to make a very specific comment based on my own personal experience in the field, and at the same time, research in the university where I currently teach, and also offering group corporate social responsibilities and Kenya national corporate social responsibilities. I'm specifically talking about PPP, private-public sector partnership. I speak this from a premise that in 2004-2008, I was the technical advisor for UNDP Kenya, in charge of or implementing the public sector, private sector partnerships. Now I teach in the university. Actually, little has been done as far as this partnership is concerned to the benefit of our youths. And that is why we are talking about mismatch. I worked with FKE, Federation of Kenyan Employers, that has documented a lot of information about mismatch of skills between university and industry. The onus is upon us, we as the academia, to work closely, because it is not, you know, when we talk about, you know, when we, you can hear me now?
Yes, yes, now it's better.
Yeah, when we talk about the government, sometimes I wonder who is the government. Government is you and me, the one who is in charge, who works in the university. You should be able to go to the private sector. I just want to point out to one country, Malaysia. I've been able to partner with several universities in Malaysia, and in Malaysia, no student will graduate from the university without knowing where he or she is going to work. But in our country, we churn out several thousands and hundreds of graduates not knowing where they're going to want to work. Yesterday, I was purchasing a certain equipment in one of the towns in Kenya. I found a young graduate actually, I was concerned why he was seated there. He told me that I have a bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering, and I'm trying to find out whether they can give me even any piece of work here. But where he was, it was in an electricity shop, which sells electrical equipments. This is simply because we, the academia, we are not doing anything or much as far as private-public sector partnership is concerned. We must be able to develop curriculums jointly with the private sector and the public sector for the benefit of our youths. Dr.
Yes, Dr. I think we have heard your point. Can we go back? Can we go to the next?
For everybody, and I strongly believe, based on experiences which we have from all over, we have opportunities for everybody. But the challenge which we have, we always talk about the government. Who is the government? It is you and me. By creating several initiatives, critical skills, and bringing various experiences which we have acquired from everywhere. Actually, my last point on this is this. For these years I've worked around the world, I have seen powerful Kenyans creating opportunities for this world outside there. Why don't we do the same in our country, Kenya? Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you. So we go to Mr. Odhiambo.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Very well.
My name, Odhiambo Gilbert. I'm a teacher. My interest is in applied linguistics and a bit of anthropology. Personally, I would compare youth bulge to a pregnancy. It is not a result of happenstance. It does not happen by magic. Somebody does something, there's a baby bump, then we have children, and there you are, you have a youth bulge. Again, depending on preparation and appropriateness of circumstances, a pregnancy can be a thing of joy or a curse. Youth bulge can present opportunities and challenges. And for that matter, preparation and care are key for a healthy and productive youth bulge. This is where policy preparation and investment are important. Indeed, issues like resource demands, time sensitivity, and the transformative potential of youth bulge should be significant. Now, it appears to me that we have had our pleasure. We have quite a handful of children, and we are thinking of sending them to our neighbors to go and work there and bring back the dollar or food. Yet it should not be lost on us that our neighbors have their interests, including exploitation, modern day slavery, and others. Yet for me, as an applied linguist, I would be interested in the linguistic implication of youth bulge. For example, language education policies and their impact on youth employability. The question I would ask is, how do Kenya's language policy in education, particularly with regard to English and Kiswahili instruction, affect young people's job prospects and economic participation? 2, multilingualism as an economic aspect. I would be asking the question, how can Kenya's linguistic diversity be leveraged as an economic advantage, particularly in sectors like international business, tourism, and digital services? 3, I would be interested in language technology and digital literacy. How is the role of language technology used in fostering digital literacy among Kenyan youth? And then 4, probably I would be interested in language and entrepreneurship. And the question I would be interested in is, how can language skills and linguistic knowledge be used to foster entrepreneurship among Kenyan youth, particularly in areas like content creation, translation services, and language-related startups? I want to say thank you. I've had a very insightful moment here. I did not read the policy statement or anything like that, but that is my contribution. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mr. Diambo, and for posing very, very critical questions that we will explore given time. I want to go to Grace Njoroge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okumu. And thank you to our presenters. I want to just address, maybe just seek some clarification from Ambassador. I hope he's still on the call. Salah Hamad, he raised the issue of the African Youth Strategy, where he articulated that we seem to have the strategy, but we don't have an evaluation strategy, especially on reporting what countries are doing on a regular basis. And so, because I don't have the benefit of having read the policy brief, I just wanted to find out from him or any one of us, how can we address that matter? Because if we have a strategy without a reporting mechanism, what ought we to do at this level? Is it a heads of state matter? So that this information goes back to whoever is in charge and provide that aspect that is missing. I also wanted to raise a concern from Madam Omlako. She raised a concern about internship opportunities at on-job training. And she said that we don't seem to have integrated these two matters in a structured way. But I am aware that the Public Service Commission has been posting advertising for internships, and actually in some of the organizations where I have worked myself, we sort of have been receiving interns on a very regular basis. So I wanted her to probably articulate what the issue is on this matter, because there is a system. I'm sure we have integrated this, and I've worked with some of them. Just to elaborate for this policy brief, what exactly is missing? Because the system is there. And when we look at the CBC, I know one of us, I can't remember who raised, I think it's Gikonyo, who raised the concern the CBC isn't really working as it should. But for us who are in the university sector, we are yet to implement. We might want to know that when I look at the policy documents on CBC at the university level, the matter of on-job training is rather well captured. We haven't reached there, but the policy documents are quite clear. Thank you very much, even for the invitation by the Mashariki Research and
Thank
Policy
you so much,
Center.
Madam Grace. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Our last question will give opportunity to Matthew Ichite. Matthew?
Good morning. Good morning, Willis. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. Thank you for inviting me to this discussion. And thank you for General Kabage, who is a very good friend and mentor. I've listened. Christian Ichite, of course, is my name. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary of the African Peace Support Trainers Association. I am joining you from Yaoundé, Cameroon. I am a Nigerian, and it's really of interest to me that Nigeria has been referenced in so many things. I mean, as the discussions progressed. Nigeria, as you know, is over 200 million population at the moment, and half of these young people. So the theme of this discussion is crucial to us. And the first point I want to make is that if in the past the young people were ignored, recent events show that that can no longer be the situation, both in Kenya, experiences in Kenya, and recent experiences in Nigeria. With this, I think as a security sector actor, I want to draw our attention to two points. Number one is the mindset. We talked about expectations from the youth. Up until now, I think most of us still see the youth from the perspective of the youth Bulge theory, which sees the youth essentially as a recipe for political violence. And I think we have to own up to that fact. Most of us on the other side of the divide tend to see them that way. And that is not the expectation that they look up to when they interact with us. I listened to one of the speakers who said, government is everybody, you and I, but the youth don't see themselves as part, of the government yet, and they have to be made to be part of that. And this is what they're expecting. They expect those in government to follow up with a long-term strategic planning and the national development planning that includes the interests and the needs of the youth, in terms of skills acquisition, in terms of training, in terms of accessibility to new technology, so that they can be a force for development and not a recipe for violence. And I think for me, the second point I want to make is that most importantly, we need to begin to take more seriously the relationship between the increasing population of young people across the continent and issues of security and development. It is up to us to make the youth a force for development, not for insecurity across the continent. And these are some of the ways we look at them that probably brings up the kinds of conflict that we are beginning to see, from the actions of policymakers and to the actions of the policy implementers, across the continent, not only Nigeria. Well, I feel all the other points I'd wanted to raise have been covered. I thank you very much, Willis, for this opportunity, and I wish you good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chito, for your comments.
I can make a comment, Dr.
Who is speaking?
My name is Dr. Kenneth Nyangena.
Okay.
I'm a participant here. I teach at Laikipia University too. I think a colleague has spoken. Allow me to take less than a minute to make a comment arising from the presentation of Dr. Gikonyo. I want to agree with her that the levels of participation of the relevant stakeholders in policy making is wanting in this country. That an introduction of CBC and non-involvement of key stakeholders, especially the experts, will raise some of the concerns that we are seeing here. I have been involved in public participation, and what I have seen is a predetermination of what the outcome is. And therefore, even if you go to the field and involve stakeholders, you still want to stick to what you thought as an institution, as an organization. Therefore, it's critical that the young people of this country be involved actively. I don't know whether this stems from the family socialization, that this is a son, this is a daughter who cannot tell me anything, and, transit to institutions where we work. And therefore, the proposal would be, the recommendation is that these young people be involved actively so that decisions that come out of any activity is collective. Thank you very much, Dr. for the minute.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyangena. We appreciate your comments. Because of time, we may not be able to respond to all the questions that have been raised. At this juncture, I would like to call upon Dr. John Mwangi and Dr. Peter Kirui to respond to a few questions, and then we go into the closing remarks by Ambassador Gashero. Welcome, John and Peter.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'll just make a few observations. We've listened very, very keenly to the discussions led by the discussants, but also the participants. We'll take these comments into the account as we revise this policy brief and eventually make it into a working paper. So these comments are very, very useful. We particularly note the point around policy making not being, fully cognizant of the environment, and therefore, as a research institution, we will take into concern these points. But we really appreciate the kind of discourse and conversations that have happened, listening to the voices of young people, listening to policymakers, and I believe this is a conversation we cannot fully exhaust at a time like this, but we will take the comments and the discussions forward. Thank you. Dr. Kirui, some comments as we wind up with.
Yes, thank you very much for the feedback about our policy brief. Like my co-presenter has already mentioned, we are going to include the views of the various stakeholders in this. I think what has come out very strongly is what is the role of the state when it comes to unemployment. Professor Iraki did ask, are there jobs somewhere that are hidden and, where youth are not accessing it? And that raises very fundamental question in terms of the role of the state just to create an environment for people to, or for the private sector to thrive, or the state is actually one of the partners in terms of providing it with that. So I think we are going to interrogate that further, because I think the balance should be in between, where the state is both an enabler in terms of regulating, but also ensuring that it doesn't throw all the devices into the private sector to do that. So it has been very enriching. We really appreciate. And finally, indeed, what has also come out strongly is the views that some of our policies and the knowledge and everything that informs our decision is mainly informed by foreign actors. And there is need to try and domesticate that, especially involving local knowledge and generally in appreciation of the African realities, realizing that the external actors may not necessarily be doing some of the things that they do in the interest of Africa or in the interest of the member states, especially in Africa. So thank you so much. we are going to put all those into our paper to enrich it further. And thank you, our moderator, Dr. Willis Okumu. Thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, John and Peter. So at this juncture, we'd like to call upon Ambassador David Gasheru to give us the closing remarks. Ambassador Gasheru is a former Deputy Ambassador of Kenya to Washington. Welcome, Ambassador Gasheru.
Thank you very much, Nkumu. Allow me to first convey my special thanks and appreciation to MRPC team under the stewardship of Dr. Kabage for organizing this timely and impactful webinar on youth Bulge and democratic dividends. Let me express my sincere gratitude to all the participants and discussants for the insightful contribution to today's webinar. I acknowledge in a special way the policymakers present who managed to join us today with representation from government, regional, intergovernmental organizations. Your expertise and shared perspective have been invaluable in illuminating the dynamic of harnessing Kenya's demographic dividends for economic growth. As we draw our discussion to a close, it is evident that the issues conversely are both critical and complex. We have explored how Kenya's youth population can be a tremendous asset, provided we address the existing challenges effectively and proactively. Today's dialogue has shed light on the way forward and emphasized the need for strategic and informed practical policy interventions. As we move forward, I urge all of us to embrace the value of collaborations and partnership in advancing our shared goals. Effective collaboration with like-minded institutions is crucial, translating our collective research and insight into meaningful actions. By fostering strong alliances and partnership, we can enhance the impact of our work and drive sustainable development. We in MRPC believe the research provides the evidence and insight needed to inform our decision and shape effective policies. It is through rigorous analysis and informed debate that we can craft solutions that truly address the gap that hamper our progress. In this regard, as one of the board members of MRPC, I wish to invite like-minded institutions and partners to join us in this endeavor. Let us unite in our commitment to creating prosperous and peaceful world. The path ahead is one of our cooperation, shared vision, and mutual support. Thank you again for your participation, contributions, and commitment. Together, let's collaborate to innovate and work towards a brighter future. Asante sana, and do have a productive rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gasheru, for your closing remarks. We want to appreciate every person that joined this session today, and we hope that this discussion that we have had here will go a long way in shaping our policies in this country on matters youth, so that we can be able to address emerging issues as this young nation carries forward into the next decade and more. So thank you so much, all from me and from the team at MRPC. We thank you so much for your participation in the webinar today. Thank you.
दो चीजों के लिए फोन किया था। एक कल मैंने तेरे को एक ईमेल भेजा
Understand.